All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. And thanks to all the organizers for such a wonderful event. I hope you're all having a great time, as I am. It's not my first time speaking at the conference, but it is my first time at PYCON UK and my first PYCON as well, so I'm very excited to be here. All right, I'm Sage Abdullah. You can find me online at Laymanage on GitHub, Mastodon, Blue Sky, and other places. I'm from Indonesia, and these days I work at Torchbox in the UK to maintain and develop Wagtail CMS, an open source content management system built on top of Django. So thank you to Torchbox for paying me to be here. If you want to know more about us or Wagtail, please find me at the Django booth. I will also be around for sprints tomorrow morning. And back in 2019, I did Google Summer of Code, or GSoC, with Django as a student, and last year as a mentor. And if you go to the djangoproject.com website, you'll see Django's tagline, the web framework for perfectionists with deadlines. I don't know who came up with it, but it's catchy. And I looked at the web archive, and it's been there since the first snapshot in July 2005. So anyway, but to me, Django is the web framework that changed my life. And let me tell you why. So I first learned Django during my second year, actually, of uni back in 2018 as part of the web programming course. And they used to teach PHP, but in 2017, they updated the curriculum to teach Python for the basics. So it makes sense to use Django for the web course. And yes, I just put a screenshot of a slide within my slides. As part of the course, we were tasked to build our own website, and at one point we learned about making AJAX requests from the browser to Google Books API, and the assignment was to add a feature that lets you search for books and show the results. And there are bonus points if you could save your favorite books. I didn't want to bother creating the models and whatnot just to get the bonus points, especially since the data came from a third-party service. So I was hoping I could just save the list of books somewhere, like saving a Python object. And I found out that Django has a JSONField that lets you store dictionaries and lists, but it was only available for Postgres. We did use Postgres on Heroku for the deployed website, but for local development, we used SQLite. So JSONField was not an option for me. So I was like, okay, how hard is it to have my own JSON field? If I can transform the dictionary into a string, I can save it to a text field. Then I just need to find some way to parse the string back into a dictionary. And that's what I did. So I just used Python's built-in JSON library to serialize and deserialize the data. Then I can save it in a text field. That being said, if I were to do this today, I would just use a dedicated model with foreign keys to store the saved books. But I was just a student looking to score some bonus scores. And after all that, I finished my web development course by the end of 2018. And a few months later, I saw an opportunity. This is the Google Summer of Code website back in 2019. And if you're not familiar with Google Summer of Code, or GSoC, it's an annual global program held by Google, where university students can work with an open source organization on a 3-month project in the summer, and they get paid by Google. Organizations like Django can list a few project ideas and apply to the program, and then students can submit a proposal for the project that they want to work on to be reviewed and accepted by someone from the organization. Django has participated in GSoC every year, pretty much, since 2016. And for each year, we put a list of project ideas on the wiki. I already knew about GSoC at that point, and since I've learned a bit of Django, I was curious about Django's ideas for GSoC that year. And notice how it says at the bottom, in no particular order. Well, it just so happened that the first item on the list was a cross-database JSON field. So that was basically the exact thing I hacked together in my project. So I was hooked. And the thing with GSoC is that if you wanted to get in, you have to realize that there are other students like yourself. So you need to convince the mentors that you are the right person for the job. You have to stand out among other applicants. It's a lot like job hunting. So before I started working on my proposal, I concocted a plan. I wanted to get at least one pull request to Django merged, but hopefully more than just one. I started looking into the contribution guide, and I watched the ticket tracker, waiting for a new ticket marked as easy pickings, which is kind of like a good first issue on GitHub. And they come and go so quickly. And eventually I was able to land my first PR to Django after some back and forth. As you can see, there are 21 comments on the PR for something that's essentially a one-line change with 3 lines of test and some documentation. I learned a lot from this one PR alone, and it was a great experience. You get the feeling and the common practices on how to make changes to the code base. And this is important since you need to demonstrate that you are willing to learn, you are able to follow the instructions, and you are patient, which may sound trivial, but it is actually a big deal in open source. And speaking from experience, there are people who rush to get things done and want their PR merged, but they don't follow the instructions from the maintainers, and that is not a good look. Anyway, then I had a few more PRs merged, one of which was for a ticket that I wrote myself, and all of these are basically just one-liners, but they cover different aspects: implementation, tests, and documentation. Now that I have 3 PRs, I got started with my proposal. I wrote the goals, the approach, and the timeline for the project. And mind you, at the time, I was still taking database course. So I just started learning SQL and the basic stuff like foreign keys and joins and whatnot. I only had very vague ideas of how this project was going to work. And looking back at the proposal, I think it showed. It's not a perfect proposal by any means, but I put it together in between midterm exams, so I did what I could. And then I posted it to the Django developers mailing list, and yes, we still use mailing lists back then. Got a few responses. I made a few tweaks based on the feedback, and then I waited. And then I got this. My proposal was accepted. It was like 4:30 in the morning, and I got chills from reading this email. It was happening. So over the course of the summer, I worked on the project. And usually, GSoC projects have like 1 or 2 mentors, and I was slightly intimidated when I saw that I had not 1, not 2, but 4 people mentoring me. It felt like the expectation was quite high. But thankfully, I didn't have to start from scratch. I was standing on the shoulders of giants. Obviously, we already had the Postgres JSONField at the time, which worked wonders. But we also had external packages that implemented JSONField for other database backends. We had it in Django MySQL, we had one for Oracle, and many, many other packages, some of which even predated the built-in Postgres JSONField and unfortunately unmaintained. So it should be easy, right? So on June 9th, 2019, which happened to be my 20th birthday, I submitted this initial PR to Django. So that's what, more than 6 years ago now? Where did all the time go? Anyway, you can see how many people reviewed the PR on the right side. Would anybody like to take a guess on how many comments we have here? I have blurred the number. Is it 50? 100? 200? It was 321 comments. This was just the initial PR that I kept on iterating. So at one point, we decided to close it and open a new one to start fresh. This is the final PR, opened months later in January 2020. GSoC already ended in August, and this PR was not merged until May 8th, 2020, so around the time when COVID really kicked in. And then a few months later, in August of 2020, Django 3.1 was finally released, which included the new cross-database JSONField that I worked on. So it took a little over a year from when I submitted the initial PR to the day it was released, but hey, we made it. Raise your hands if you use Django and you use JSONField. Why on earth would you use it? Why don't you use real models with real tables? Or why not just use a NoSQL database? I'm joking, thank you, glad you find it useful. Then I was invited by Carlton and Will Vincent to the Django Chat podcast. If you didn't know about Django Chat, give it a listen. I highly recommend it. This was my first ever podcast and still my only one so far. I was very nervous. I could have done better, but it's out there now. So if you do listen to it, please keep that in mind. And then a few months later, I got the opportunity to give a talk about the JSONField implementation at DjangoCon Europe 2020. It was supposed to be in person in Portugal, but COVID happened, so it was done virtually. And this was my first ever talk at the conference. And then a little over a year later, I graduated from university and was working at a startup in Indonesia. And one day, I was browsing Django's Discord server, and I saw a job listing for a junior developer by someone named Pibo, whom I didn't know at the time. But the job was remote friendly, so I went to the company's website to find out more, and I saw a different job listing for a Wagtail developer. The job is to work on Wagtail, the CMS, and doing open source as a full-time job was my dream. I looked at the requirements, and I think I pretty much ticked all the boxes, so I sent my application. And then I did a couple interviews and a coding task. I was interviewed by Tom Dyson, the CTO at the time, and he knew about my JSONField stuff, so I don't know if that played a part in it, but a few days later, I got the job. And they wanted me to move to the UK as soon as possible, but it was such a surprise to my family, so I asked to work remotely for a few months while we sorted out my visa and stuff. And do you know what one of the first things I did on the job was? Well, Wagtail had their own version of JSONField that used the text field approach. And around that time, it happened that Wagtail was about to bump its minimum version of Django to 3.2, which includes the new JSON field. So naturally, I was tasked to migrate all the existing text-based JSON fields into real JSON fields. And then I gave a talk about it at Wagtail Space US, which is Wagtail's own conference, but I did it virtually because I was still in Indonesia. And well, by the way, this year we're also doing a virtual Wagtail Space, so if you want to find out more, check it out on our website. And then a few months later, I moved to the UK. This is me on the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol during my first week in the UK. And then just a few weeks later, I went to DjangoCon Europe 2022 in Porto in person this time. And can you guess the people I met there? It was my GSoC mentors. They are some of the absolute legends in the Django community, and I was so happy to finally meet them. And you know what they say, don't meet your heroes, but I would say unless they're from the Django community, because they're awesome. And that was 3 years ago now, so I guess the rest is history. And a lot of things have happened since, but what I've shown you so far is enough to give you the idea. And that's not to mention the effect of all this on the people around me as well. My family's financial situation pretty much had a complete turnaround. We were struggling to keep our feet up, and COVID made it even worse. But no, it almost seems like it was just a bad dream, all thanks to Django. It started with me learning Django, and well, the rest didn't happen overnight. It's a snowball that keeps on rolling, and I've been very lucky to have all these opportunities. It's a privilege. So I'd like to thank the Django community for making all of this possible. And I want open source to have such an effect on many, many other people for me to just be one example out of many other people around the world. So how do we keep this going? This year, Django still participated in GSoC, and last year in particular, we had 4 projects compared to 2 when I did mine in 2019. and different projects with different different mentors and different areas of Django to improve. And now you no longer have to be a university student to join, so anybody can participate, and anybody in the community can take part in other ways. You can suggest project ideas, or if you feel like it, you can also be a mentor. And last year, I mentored a project that added support for updating JSONField on the database level. It's like a sequel to my project. It has come full circle. And 5 years later, it's very interesting to see how much of the code has changed, but also how much has stayed the same. And this year, I mentored 2 projects out of 4 that we did for Wagtail. One project was to add content security policy compatibility to Wagtail as Django is also including built-in CSV support later this year, so we try to support that. And another project for UI improvements to the media library. There is also Outreachy. It's a similar program to GSoC, but it's aimed towards supporting diversity. And Wagtail has participated in Outreachy a couple times. One of the interns that I mentored and we're really proud of, Albina, made a built-in accessibility checker into Wagtail, which helps content editors create more accessible content. It's really amazing to see a new contributor come in and make such a big impact. And Django itself has not participated in Outreachy so far, but I think it's something that more open source projects should consider. And Django also has its own Django Not Space, a mentorship program for people who want to get into contributing to Django. I think this is one of, if not the best initiative for Django ever, maybe even in open source. And if you're interested, check out the website at djangonot.space. There's also a talk about Django Not Space by Don and Rachel from DjangoCon US 2023, and I highly recommend checking it out. And I'm not sure if Python has a structured mentorship program, but I found that there's a mailing list for Python core mentorship. And if you watch the new Python documentary, I highly recommend that. You would see that even Guido himself was willing to mentor new contributors like he did with Marietta. So, having been a mentee myself and also a mentor, here are what I think makes a successful project in a mentorship program. As a mentee, I cannot stress enough how important it is to have good reading comprehension skills. As someone who is new to the project, you'll do a lot of reading to understand what the project is aiming for and how to get the project goal and how to get there in the context of the code base. It includes reading the contribution guide, the documentation, the relevant tickets, and the discussion in those tickets, and of course, the code itself. You also need to be proactive. Don't wait for the mentor to tell you what to do next. If you have questions, ask them. If you are stuck, ask for help. And if you have ideas, share them, because maybe there's something that the mentor didn't think of. And mentors are there to guide you, not to hold your hand the whole time. You also need to be open to feedback. Mentors will review your code and give you suggestions on how to improve it. And different people have different mentoring styles, so the important thing is don't take it personally. It's not about you. Well, at least usually, it's about the code. So learn from the feedback and apply it. And you also need to be patient, because I think instead of sprints, in open source, it's more of a marathon. Things take time, reviews take time, so don't rush things, but don't slack off, and enjoy the journey. And finally, you need to be persistent. There will be challenges and setbacks. You will make mistakes. You will face rejections. So don't give up, keep on trying. And on the other hand, as a mentor, it's mainly about being present and supportive. Make sure you communicate regularly with your mentee so that you can make sure they are on the right track and not blocked. Also be timely with your reviews so they can keep the momentum going. And don't be afraid to give constructive feedback, otherwise they won't learn. But remember to be kind and respectful. So overall, it's pretty obvious, but it can be quite challenging when you're volunteering with limited time and also especially when it's all virtual. I think having a scheduled weekly video call helps a lot. So how do we make the most of these mentorship programs? First, I highly suggest preparing the project ideas way ahead of time. If you're an open source maintainer, think about what are some good projects that can be done in a few months. Good projects are well-defined, not too big and not too small. Also, this might be obvious, but make sure that the idea itself has been accepted by the community. You don't want to waste everybody's time by working on something that nobody wants or if there's a strong pushback. Also, don't limit yourself to core projects. For bigger projects like Django and Python, think about like the supporting packages, libraries, tools, websites, and so on. Wagtail started participating in GSoC under the Django umbrella, but now we have our own organization. Many smaller projects participate in GSoC under the PSF umbrella, for example. And make sure you have a clear contribution guide. This is crucial for new contributors to get started. It should cover the basics of how to set up the development environment, how to write the code, as you might have specific style guides, and how to run tests. Take the time to triage and label good first issues or easy pickings. This will help new contributors find something to work on. Make sure the issues are well-defined and have clear acceptance criteria. And finally, you have enough mentoring capacity. Mentoring takes time and effort and energy, so make sure you have enough people who are willing and able to mentor new contributors. Reach out to the community and see if there are people who are interested in mentoring. And so with big projects like Python and Django, mentorship is pretty much a necessity to bring new contributors in. But how do we make it sustainable? Unfortunately, there is no single answer to this question. Different projects have different needs and challenges, and also you cannot really expect people to stick around giving their time and energy essentially for free. So the best thing you can do is to be welcoming to new contributors and keeping the community engaged and motivated. There's this quote from Brett Cannon, one of the Python core developers. "I came for the language, but I stayed for the community." I think that rings true for many people in open source. And one of the ways to bring more people and get them to stay, from my experience, is to make sure your community see the value of mentorship. Celebrate the successes, learn from the mistakes, and share what you've learned and achieved with the wider community. So that's it for me. Thank you. I hope you found it useful.
Thank you, Sage. We have a short time for questions. Anybody with a question?
Thank you. A great lesson in terms of mentee becoming a mentor. I'm a mentor for one of the Python projects. The challenge we often have is imposter syndrome. People feeling they don't have the skills, they feel they're not going to be welcome, well, community welcome, but they feel they're inadequate. What guidance would you give, people in your position sort of getting involved? Because I think you did your approach was get involved in early issues, but how would you help other people feel welcome?
Right. So I think if you're someone who wants to approach the project, it definitely helps to look into the communication channels that the project has. Like, for example, Django has Django Discord, which has specific channels for new contributors. And for someone on the project itself, it helps to set up those communication channels and be welcoming when someone approaches your project. Also, don't expect them to know everything, because they don't know as much about the project as you do. So the most important bit is to be welcoming and set up the resources for someone who is new to the project.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you for that talk. That was really good. So something I was really impressed by is the drive you had to engage in open source, sort those small issues very early on. Is that something you would credit specifically to just the way you thought about software? Was there anything your peers or your mentors were doing at the time to help push you to that? Where did that drive come from?
That's a good question. I think motivation is something that's really a mystery, because for some people find motivation in different things. And for me, I think it's really nice when you find out that your code can be used by other people and you can help improve this one big project by smaller things. So when I found out that the projects tend to have like good first issue labels, it usually means that the maintainers have taken the time to triage the issue and, okay, this looks like something that a newcomer can pick up. So I think it's really encouraging for me, because it means that I don't need to know a lot about the code base. So I guess that also says about the project's maintainers to make sure that you actively triage such issues so people can be motivated to pick them up. Does that answer your question? Okay, thanks.
Anyone with a question? All right. Thank you so much, Sage, for the awesome talk. I think we can break for lunch.
Thank you.
And thank you for attending.